For many Americans, the very first thing they notice when they arrive in Australia is how safe everything feels. Cities like Brisbane, Sydney, and Adelaide seem calm and orderly, even at night. You'll see teenagers laughing on trains without tension in the air, parents letting their kids play freely in parks, and people casually leaving their shopping bags beside them at a cafe while they step inside to order. It's such a stark contrast to what many Americans are used to back home. A world where "don't leave your stuff unattended" is drilled into you from childhood. That initial sense of security is powerful. It is part of Australia's national character, an underlying trust that most people are decent and won't take what isn't theirs. This isn't to say Australia is crime-free. Of course it isn't. But the baseline expectation here is different. Australians, on the whole, assume that others will act with a basic level of respect. And when you step into that mindset for the first time as an outsider, it can feel like a breath of fresh air. But here's where the culture shock hits hardest. That easy trust can make newcomers let their guard down too much. Americans especially may swing from being hypervigilant to overly relaxed, thinking, well, if everyone's so nice, I don't have to worry. That's not the message locals are sending. They're saying, we trust people, but we are not careless. That difference might seem small, but it's a fundamental part of the Australian way of life. The truth is, Australians know how to balance trust with caution, and they expect you to do the same. Yes, you'll often find people leaving their laptops on a table in a busy library or dropping their bags on the grass during a picnic. Most of the time, nothing happens. But ask any local and they'll tell you, things can disappear, especially in crowded city centres or tourist hotspots. Petty theft does exist, even if it's less common than in many US cities. The difference is how people here think about safety. Australians don't live in a state of low-level fear. They aren't constantly scanning for threats the way many Americans are conditioned to. Instead, they live normally but stay aware. If they're on public transport, they might keep a hand on their bag. If they're sitting outside, they'll keep belongings within reach. They don't panic, they're just sensible. This can be confusing for Americans who are used to hearing constant warnings about crime. In the US, the idea is often prepare for the worst. In Australia, the mindset is don't be stupid. That is why you'll hear locals laugh at tourists who leave their wallets on cafe tables, not because they're being mean, but because they see it as an obvious mistake. Trust is valued here, but it's not blind trust. Australia's safety ain't about being naive. It's about living without fear while still understanding the world isn't perfect. To understand why Australians think this way, you need to look deeper than crime statistics. You need to understand the culture. Australia's trust-based society comes from a mix of history, geography, and values. Communities here grew up small and close-knit, often isolated by vast distances. People depended on one another, so cooperation wasn't optional, it was survival. That legacy remains today, even in the biggest cities. Australians place a huge emphasis on fairness and decency. Don't be a jerk is practically an unwritten law. People expect honesty, and when that expectation is met again and again in daily life, it builds a national habit of trust. It's also why Aussies value straightforwardness. They'll often tell you bluntly if you're doing something foolish or unsafe. It's not rudeness, it's part of that same community mindset. This cultural approach contrasts sharply with the US, where individual responsibility is emphasized over collective trust. Americans grow up hearing "look out for yourself," while Australians grow up with "look out for each other." That's why locals might seem so relaxed about safety. They genuinely believe most people around them will do the right thing. And often, they are right. But they also know there's always an exception, so they don't confuse trust with carelessness. This is the nuance many newcomers miss. Australia isn't magically free of crime. What's different is the social contract, the expectation that people will respect each other's space and property. It's not foolproof, but it shapes the entire experience of living here and changes how safety is felt day to day. One of the biggest cultural shifts Americans face when they come to Australia isn't about food, slang, or driving on the left side. It's about the balance between safety and personal freedom. In the US, the idea of freedom is woven into daily life. People are taught from a young age to look out for themselves, to question authority, and to never let anyone tell them what they can or cannot do. That mindset extends into the smallest details, like refusing to leave a bag unattended or pushing back on a rule that seems unnecessary. In Australia, the culture leans more toward collective responsibility. Rules are not seen as restrictions. They're viewed as tools to keep everyone safe and society running smoothly. Something as simple as not hanging your arm out of a car window isn't about controlling you. It's about preventing accidents that have happened before. Americans might feel like they're being restricted, but Australians often see those same rules as common sense safeguards. This difference even shapes how people interact. Where an American might view a stranger approaching them on public transport with suspicion, many Australians are more likely to interpret that as friendliness rather than a threat. And while Americans tend to rely on self-protection instincts, Australians lean more on the idea that most people are trustworthy, until proven otherwise. These small habits, how we tip, whether we lock our bags to a chair, or how we respond to safety rules, are more than just quirks. They reflect deeper values. In America, individuality and personal responsibility dominate. People are taught that they're in charge of their own safety, their own success, and their own lives. That belief creates a society that's innovative, outspoken, and fiercely protective of personal rights. Australia, on the other hand, builds its culture around balance, fairness, and community. Safety regulations, social trust, and even relaxed attitudes about strangers all stem from a shared belief that life works best when people look out for one another. It doesn't mean Australians are naive. Theft, crime, and caution still exist, but the baseline expectation is that society can be trusted. Neither approach is right or wrong, they're just different ways of seeing the world. And for Americans arriving in Australia, understanding that difference is often the key to truly settling in. Because once you stop seeing those habits as strange and start seeing them as reflections of a culture built on trust and community, the country starts to feel a lot less foreign and a lot more like home. If there's one thing this shows, it is that safety isn't just about laws or crime rates, it is about how a society chooses to live together. Australia and the US both care deeply about safety, but they express it in completely different ways. And for many Americans, learning to trust that difference is the hardest and most rewarding part of adjusting to life here. Now I want to hear from you if you've lived in or visited Australia. What surprised you most about how people think about safety and trust? And if you're watching from the US, would you feel comfortable leaving your bag unattended? Or does that idea still feel risky? Share your thoughts below. Your stories and opinions help shape future videos on this channel. And if you enjoy exploring how cultures collide, connect, and challenge the way we see the world, make sure you hit subscribe. This is just the beginning. We are diving deeper into global habits, surprising traditions, and the real stories behind culture shock around the world.